I knew something was wrong the moment my father started screaming. It was a jagged, desperate sound, nothing like the man who raised me. When I jumped off my bunk, the flashlight from someone's phone flickered across the dorm floor, and in that weak, trembling light I saw him kicking at the concrete as if something beneath it had latched onto him. His hands were clawing at his throat, trying to tear off an invisible grip. His legs thrashed so violently the metal beds rattled, and for a moment I truly thought he was dying. By the time 3 girls pulled me back and got a lamp turned on, the invisible thing, whatever it was, seemed to release him. My father crawled away from the spot where he'd been lying, pushing himself backwards until his spine hit the bed frame. His lips were bluish. His breath came in short, wet gasps. And when he finally managed to look at me, his voice came out in a hoarse, broken whisper. "Rain, something was under the floor." He wouldn't say more. He wouldn't even let me touch him. He just kept staring at the concrete like it might crack open again. At dawn, before any of us had finished brushing our teeth, he grabbed his bag and left for the bus station. He didn't eat breakfast. Didn't say goodbye to the roommates. He only pulled me aside long enough to tell me one thing: do not stay here more than 7 months. Then he left, and the factory swallowed him back into its noise. At the time, I tried to laugh it off. I told myself he'd had a sleep paralysis attack, or a nightmare brought on by exhaustion. The industrial park was full of stories anyway, stories about how the land used to be a cemetery during the Cultural Revolution, how the graves hadn't been moved properly, how the ground remembered. I had just arrived from Hunan 2 weeks earlier. I was 19, desperate, underpaid, and determined not to be afraid of anything. But there was one thing I could never explain away: the 6th floor. The building had 7 stories, but the 6th was always dark and always locked. Everyone whispered about a girl named Chung Lin, the 17-year-old daughter of the man who financed the entire complex. She had jumped from the 6th floor balcony in 2021, days before the factory opened. They said the security camera still caught her every night at 2:47 a.m., a figure in a white nightgown standing at the railing, hair covering her face, unmoving. She never jumped on camera. She simply dissolved, fading like smoke. No one went near that floor except the cleaning lady, Xiu, who carried fruit, buns and milk tea there every week. She claimed the offerings kept the little miss calm. Once, when she forgot, she was found the next morning on the stairwell with deep purple bruises around her throat, the perfect shape of small fingers pressing down. After that, no one questioned her rituals. My mistake came on a blistering hot evening when the shift ended early. The girls were trading ghost stories outside the workshop, laughing nervously, grateful to be off their feet. Someone mentioned hearing footsteps above the ceiling, and the new hires gasped like children. I rolled my eyes and said, lightly, stupidly, "I only believe what I see with my own eyes." The moment the words left my mouth, the fluorescent lights on the 6th floor, lights that had been dead for months, flicked on for a split second. The glow poured through the grimy windows like a flash of lightning. Then there was a sharp, echoing pop, and every light went out at once. The entire building seemed to inhale and hold its breath. I tried to brush it off. I even forced myself to laugh. But that night, I collapsed with a fever so high I could barely keep my eyes open. The clinic sent me back to the dorm with a packet of fever pills. They said it was heat exhaustion, but I knew exhaustion didn't make you hallucinate. Because every time I blinked, I saw the same girl. She hung upside down from the ceiling above me, her long hair dripping like she had just climbed out of a river. Her neck was twisted backwards, facing me with 2 empty eye sockets leaking thick, black liquid. She drifted downward, inch by inch, until I felt the cold air of her breath brushing my face. Each time I screamed myself awake, she vanished, but the terror stayed. It clung to my skin like sweat. When the fever finally broke, I forced myself to sit up. My throat was raw from crying. The room smelled damp, like old concrete after rain. And on the ceiling, directly above my bed, I saw it. A footprint. Small, bare, and soaked as if someone had stepped there with wet feet. The shape of a teenage girl's foot pressed into the concrete. I stared at it until the sun came up. That was when I decided to leave the factory, no matter what it cost. My brother, Lin Jie, worked as a team lead on night shift. When I told him I wanted out, he didn't argue. His face tightened in a way that frightened me more than any ghost story. "It follows the ones who talk about it," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have said that sentence." 2 days later, I got hired by a high-end restaurant called Tianhe Tower. Better pay, better building, better dorms. The staff lived on the 18th and 19th floors. I thought I'd left the darkness behind. But the first night I moved in, I noticed a door near the end of the hallway. Heavy. Locked. And behind its frosted glass, I could see the faint glow of an altar, candles flickering around a framed photograph of a 17-year-old girl I recognized immediately. It was her. The same girl who hung above my bed. The same girl the camera saw at 2:47 a.m. I had escaped the factory. But not the girl upstairs. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. No matter how many times I told myself I had misseen the face in that mirror-like sheen on the door, something inside me, something animal, kept whispering that I had actually interrupted someone. Or something. By 3:40 a.m., I was lying flat on my back, eyes burning, listening to every sound the old house made. Floorboards expanding. The heater clicking. A soft, barely there, scratching from the outside wall, probably just a branch, I told myself. Americans call this kind of sound ambient noise, simple background sound, but tonight every tiny noise came through sharp as glass. At 4:17 a.m., a sudden thump echoed above me. Not from the hallway. Not from the stairs. Right above my room. The attic. And my stomach tightened so hard it felt like my ribs shifted. Because in this house, the attic wasn't accessible. There was no ladder. No opening. Mrs. McAllister had said it was sealed decades ago, not safe anymore. Another thump. Then a long drag across the ceiling, like something heavy being pulled with slow, lazy strength. I sat up, my throat dry like I had swallowed sand. "This house breathes," I whispered to myself. A throwaway phrase my American roommate used to describe old buildings that groan and pop, but this didn't feel like breathing. This felt like movement. When the dragging stopped directly above my bed, I bolted upright and flicked on the lamp. Light blasted across the room, but something felt wrong. The air was too still. Like the house itself was holding its breath. Then my phone buzzed. A notification banner glowed, Cam 1, motion detected. I froze. Cam 1 was the hallway. I hadn't checked those cameras since setting them up, mostly because the app crashed so much that it barely worked. But right now, the thumbnail preview showed something unmistakable. A silhouette. Thin. Tall. Standing facing my door. Not moving. Not shifting. Just watching. I forced myself to open the live view. The connection lagged, then sharpened into a shaky black and gray feed from the cheap infrared sensor. The figure was still there. But the second I leaned closer to the screen, the silhouette began to tilt its head. Slow. Deliberate. Like it was trying to listen. My breath stopped in my throat, and I felt my pulse in my gums. "It's a glitch," I muttered. A compression artifact. Compression artifact, Loi Hin on Kai camera Ri Tien Ko Gang Nindu Lu, Keen Kan Hui Mio. But I knew even as I said it, that wasn't a glitch. Then the silhouette did something that killed the last remaining bit of denial inside me. It stepped forward. Not toward my room. Toward the camera. One step. Then another. Then it leaned in so close the screen warped into noise. A vague, pale oval filled the frame, like a face pressed inches from the lens. And then the camera feed cut. Just dive. No static. No flicker. Just black. I didn't remember standing up, but suddenly I was on my feet, heart throwing itself against my ribs, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. The silence outside my room was suffocating. I waited for footsteps. A doorknob turning. Anything. But the house stayed quiet. Utterly quiet. And somehow that was worse. I walked backward until I touched the wall. I wasn't stepping out there. Not until sunrise. Not until I had people around me. Not until I understood what the hell was happening inside this place. I stayed awake until morning, staring at the door. When the first light spilled through the curtains, I finally convinced myself to open the hallway camera again. The feed loaded. And this time, it showed nothing. The hallway was empty. Drywall. A small nightlight. A framed landscape painting from the 70s. But something was new. A dark, vertical streak ran down the middle of the wall, about 6 feet high, maybe 2 inches wide. Like something had dragged a wet finger straight down the paint. Or leaned its face there. Curiosity and fear fought inside me, but that streak, it felt like a taunt. A signature. Before I could decide what to do, I heard footsteps downstairs. Slow. Heavy. Too heavy for the old lady who owned the house. I grabbed my backpack and camera bag and slipped out of my room. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to walk, silent, keeping close to the wall. Halfway down the staircase, something made me stop dead. The front door was wide open. Cold morning air blew in, carrying the smell of damp earth. The footsteps I'd heard weren't downstairs. They were directly behind me. On the second floor. Right where I had just come from. My entire spine went cold. I turned my head, barely, enough to glance over my shoulder. And the last thing I saw before I sprinted out of that house was a shadowy arm pulling quietly back into the hallway. As if whoever it belonged to didn't want to be seen yet. I ran until my lungs burned, but even after I reached the road, something lingered in my mind, clinging like cobweb. That arm didn't move like a person's. It moved like something imitating one. Something learning. Something patient. Something that had been watching me long before I arrived. I wish I could say I kept running until I reached town. I wish I could say the morning air cleared my head and convinced me none of this was real. But I stopped after maybe a quarter mile, bent over with my hands on my knees, shaking so hard my teeth clicked together. Because something about that arm, the way it slipped back into the darkness without urgency, told me this wasn't just a haunting. It wasn't even a person. It was a presence. And it had no reason to rush. Predators never rush when the prey is still within reach. My phone buzzed again. Another notification I didn't want. Cam 2, motion detected. Cam 2 was in the living room, pointing at the front door, the same door I'd seen hanging wide open minutes earlier. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't want to look. But curiosity, the deadly kind humans are cursed with, made me tap. The feed loaded slowly, lagging. Then it appeared. The door was closed now. Tightly shut. Bolt locked. But something else was wrong. The frame of the camera had shifted, like it had been touched. Tilted upward just a few degrees. And the wall opposite the camera, white yesterday, faded yellow this morning, was now marked by 2 long streaks, symmetrical, vertical, about shoulder width apart. As if someone had pressed both hands flat against it and dragged downward. But the streaks were too long. Far too long. They ran almost from the top of the doorway to the floor. I felt sick. That wasn't height. That was reach. I turned away from the screen, adrenaline pounding. I had to get out of here. Leave the equipment. Leave everything. Just go. The house could burn down for all I cared. But as I started down the road, something strange happened. The wind shifted, and for a moment the entire world felt muted. Like someone had put a thick blanket over the sound of the trees and the distant traffic from the highway. My footfalls went muffled. Even my breathing felt swallowed. I stopped walking. The air behind me pressed heavier, like the temperature dropped 5 degrees in a single blink. A weight settled on my back, not touching me, but close enough that my spine recognized it. Someone was standing behind me. No footsteps. No approach. Just there. I turned slowly, expecting a person. A hiker. A neighbor. Anything with a human explanation. But the road behind me was empty. Completely empty. Yet the feeling didn't go away. Instead, it shifted, like a hand sliding from the back of my neck to my chest, wrapping invisible fingers around my heartbeat. Not squeezing. Just feeling the rhythm. Testing its pace. Like whatever stood there was learning something about me. "Stop," I whispered. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. And the sensation vanished instantly. Not faded. Just gone. Like whoever, or whatever, was watching had obeyed. That scared me more than if it hadn't. Predators don't obey. They indulge. I kept walking, faster now, pushing toward the small diner I'd seen when I'd arrived the day before. Cars rolled by now, comforting, normal. I kept telling myself that once I got around people, all this would evaporate. But something followed. Not sound, not shadow, something else. A pressure that moved when I moved. Like a pulse syncing with mine but slightly out of rhythm. A second heartbeat, one step behind my own. When I reached the diner door, I felt it stop at the edge of the sidewalk. Like it couldn't, or wouldn't, cross the threshold. Inside, everything was suddenly too bright. Too loud. Plates clattering. A waitress calling orders. Human noise flooded my senses, washing the terror clean for a moment. I sat in a booth and ordered coffee with hands that wouldn't stay still. When the waitress walked away, a man in the next booth lowered his newspaper and looked at me. "You're staying at the old McAllister place, aren't you?" My blood iced. "How? How did you know?" "Because you look like the others did. The ones who left in the middle of the night." My throat tightened. "What others?" He leaned forward, voice dropping low. "Son, that house isn't haunted. It's hollow. There's space in the walls. Space between the walls. Old construction flaw, they said. Nonsense if you ask me." I swallowed. "What's inside it?" He shook his head. "It isn't inside the walls. It is the walls. It moves through them. Watches through cracks. Mimics faces it's seen. Learns voices. Learns footsteps." He paused. "And it hates being seen." My stomach flipped. The face in the reflection. The silhouette leaning toward the camera. The arm retreating into the hallway. The black streaks on the walls. The weight behind me. "It only follows people it chooses," he added quietly. "Doesn't always stay at the house." My pulse stopped. "What do you mean doesn't stay?" He sighed, folding the newspaper. "You didn't think you left it behind, did you?" A sound like fingernails dragging ran along the outside wall of the diner. Soft. Slow. Testing. The man's eyes widened, not at the sound, but at something behind me. I turned. And in the window's reflection, right over my shoulder, was a tall, pale shape leaning in behind me. No face. Just the outline of one. Watching. Learning. And smiling, a smile too wide, stretching inhumanly across the reflection. The lights flickered. And the reflection moved closer.